name's Stephen Wolinsky, and I'm a disciple of Nisargadatta Maharaj. There's no such thing as non-duality. So the only question you have to ask yourself is, if you have duality and non-duality as two linguistic terms, and the question would be, is there such a thing as non-duality prior to the word non-duality? So there's no such thing as non-duality. The problem is that if we have non-duality, it all of a sudden becomes a state or a goal or something I want to be in or do and have in, so that I can kind of perceive the world and have changed my life and have this whole experience. All the concepts come on top of that. But you have to realize that non-duality is just a word. It's a pointer. But once you have non-duality, you have duality. So the question really is there such a thing as non-duality prior to the word non-duality? Well, if someone says that I am in a non-dual experience, there has to be an experiencer there. If there's an experiencer or an I there, then obviously you're in dual altogether. I am having some experience. Whatever the experience is, I love myself, I hate myself, or I'm in non-dual awareness. So when people say non-dual awareness or something, I don't know what they're talking about, because there's still an I there. So there's several ways to approach it. One is, the Buddha had said basically, you will not necessarily be aware of your own enlightenment. Why? Because there won't be an I there to experience it. Janeshwar Maharaj, who wrote a book called The Amritanubhav, he was not into non-duality. Even though he's one of the most acknowledged great gurus of India, he wasn't into it. He was into being just very close. And his metaphor was that it's better to be able to taste sugar than be sugar. Sugar can't taste itself. And many, many years ago, I was with Baba Prakashananda, and he said to me, I asked him about liberation. And he said, what's liberation? And I had all my concepts, merging, oneness, whatever word you could imagine. And as I said each one of these words to him, I realized that I looked at him, it was nonsense. And he looked at me and he said, you don't want liberation. You don't want it. Because if you have it, you won't be there to appreciate it. So the non-dual state, if people are looking for a state, they're looking for a state basically dealing with pleasure and pain. I want pleasure, I don't want pain. If I have a non-dual state, I won't have pain anymore, I want the non-dual state. It's just that simple. So non-duality, it's like nirvana, it means extinction. What does that mean? It's like a candle that's lit with a flame, the candle light gets blown out. There's no more you. You don't even know it. And so, again, is there such a thing called non-duality? There's a word called non-duality, but it's nothing to do with me. I'm prior to non-duality, prior to the word I that even knows anything about non-duality. Now, even more importantly, Nagarjuna, who's the founder of Madhyamika Buddhism, he had his 8 negations. And one of his 8 negations is, there is no unity, there is no duality. There's neither one. They do not exist. Let's look at several lenses. These are all stories, metaphors, right? They're all obviously just pictures, you could say, or abstractions of what the I is. From a neurological level, you could say the I is formed through a biochemical reaction in the brain and so on, and the I thoughts come and go and so on, primarily related to, you could say, if you took a psychological perspective, we could say that map, that model would tell you the psychological perspective would say, the I is formation through genetics and introjections. In other words, you take on from mom and dad and your genetics. That's one lens. Another lens is a biochemical reaction in the brain, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Another thing you could say, it's an archetype from another dimension. There's an infinite number of ways to describe this I, the sense of I. But what does happen is the I sense gets generally fused with the body. Fused, merged together. So all of a sudden, not only is there an I thought, its reference point is the body. Okay. So Maharaj used to say, you think that you're having a thought. You're not having a thought. Thoughts happen. And in Zen, since I'm on the kind of the Zen track lately, in Zen, they would, the koan they use, or their saying they would say is, a dead tree is murmuring in the skull. In other words, you have in the skull, this idea in the skull, something that's dead. It's not there, it's a piece of meat. And you have this idea that this piece of meat is producing these things, a dead tree, inside the skull. Then the question would be, if you held that, these thoughts, I love myself, I hate myself, I'm glad, all that stuff, if all that was just a dead tree in some kind of skull consciousness and had nothing whatsoever to do with you, I'm not the I. So you could say the I is a linguistic metaphor. I mean, there's so many different vantage points. I guess that's the point of the whole thing, is that everyone is going to give you a different map. If you go to a psychologist, they'll give you the one map. If you go to a neurologist or a neuroscientist, they'll give you this map. If I go into a quantum physicist, the quantum physicist is going to say, you have nothingness. John Wheeler, the famous physicist who passed away from Princeton, used to say, nothingness is the building blocks of the universe. So you have nothingness, and the nothingness contracts, and you're going to get superstrings. If you want to go another angle, the new angle is superstrings. If you don't want to go that angle, you get elements form, and atoms and electrons and molecules, which form chemicals. And eventually, somehow down the line, you get an I. If you take the lens of the Bhagavad Gita 5,300 years ago, they're going to say the sense of I is created through an interactions of the elements, air, earth, water, fire, and ether, and the forces, Raja, Tama, and Sattva, different forces. So I guess what I want to clear about is every single one is going to give you a different map. None of them have anything to do with anything. However, the key in it is, does it unlock your door? If I say to you, the I sense is formed through an interaction of the forces, the elements, air, earth, water, fire, and ether, and the gunas, you can use, if that key hits your window and unlocked your door, you go, wow, there's no I. The I appears only through this interaction. If we took a quantum position, if I translated it, we translated it from 5,300 years ago and their science to quantum science today, we could say that the I thought, or the sense of I, is created by an interaction of the forces and the dimensions. Energy, space, mass, time, distance, location, light, sound, gravity, electromagnetics. All of these forces interact, and voila, you've got a sense of I. Now, if that's true, then how could I have anything to do with anything? The I is produced, and one day it will not be produced, like a chair or anything else, and it will disappear. So I think that any of these perspectives of what I is, you're going to get an answer dependent upon what is the point to view from. Point of view is a point of view from, the lens, the information. That particular model is going to give you a different thing. I think what's important to notice is what unlocks your door. So what unlocks one person's door might be the Bhagavad Gita, 5,300 years ago. Another one might be the physics. Another one might be the neuroscience, the I arises after the fact. Another one could even be the psychological thing. Who I am is a combination of genetics and what was taken on for survival. That's a very valid psychological point in space-time. If I took that on, then who am I? Who am I prior to taking on the interjects and prior to these genetics? So again, what key unlocks your door to realize and question not only who am I, but I'm not the I? And is there an I prior to the word I? Basically, Maharaj had two basic approaches. Approach number one was the standard neti-neti. I'm not my thoughts, memories, emotions, associations, perceptions, neti-neti, not this, neti-neti. Same with the Ramana Maharshi, same thing. Neti-neti, not this, not this. The other side of it was stay in the consciousness, be the consciousness as a portal to the absolute. When you are being the consciousness, if you will, everything is neti-neti anyway. It falls away as neti-neti, just by virtue of being in the consciousness. So you could say there's kind of two different ways, even though they both are merge. Let's go back. If we said, okay, I'm not my maps, my models, my theories, my systems. Okay, they're abstractions. I'm not my thoughts, memories, emotions, associations, perceptions, etc. Now I'm in a no-state of, he called it the I am. Okay. You're just there, and his first basic teaching is hold on to the I am and let go of everything else. So not my thoughts, memory, emotions, associations, perceptions. Okay. But if you came in that particular state, and it's a state, all states are stations, and all states or stations are temporary. I mean, any Buddhist would see temporary or impermanent, therefore neti, not this, not this. If I'm in just the I am, no thoughts, memories, emotions, associations, etc., soon I can become, or I am aware of, the blank, no state, the emptiness, the vastness, the quiet, the stillness. Okay. Now, if I were to, in quotes, I meaning there's a contraction and I move forward, in quotes, then all of a sudden I can say, I can label this no state, presence. I can call it presence. I can call it going forward, being here now. I can say I'm witnessing. If I go a little further, I could say I'm witnessing my thoughts, if these thoughts belong to a me or mine. But if I go back prior to thoughts, memories, emotions, associations, perceptions, it's not me. If I go back prior to this experience of presence, which is a state, not me. If I realize that I'm just the no state of I am, I'm not the observer. Now soon I become conscious of the no state. If the of dissolves, there's just the consciousness. So the issue of duality or non-duality, all that stuff isn't going to come up at that point. However, what Nisargadatta Maharaj said, which makes him by far and away the most unique in my readings and understandings of people that I've been with and read about in the last 1800 years, is that the consciousness isn't it. So the consciousness too is a temporary state, a temporary station. I'm just the consciousness. When you, in quotes, throw in the mix, it's a temporary state or station, it's almost like waking up out of the consciousness. Now, what happens, or what can happen certainly, is that all of a sudden there's this vast emptiness, and the consciousness is just floating in the emptiness. Now, what's important to appreciate is that the emptiness and the consciousness are one substance. They're not two. And so for Maharaj, prior to consciousness, he called the absolute. I use the term nameless absolute because you can't really put a name on it. You could say absolute prior to the word absolute, but it's prior to consciousness. And that's Nagarjuna's no unity, no duality. None of it makes any sense there. They're just ideas. That's all. Now, relating back to the science and consciousness, since that's what this is about, science and non-duality, Maharaj would give specific keys to unlock your door, and your door might be different than somebody else's door. Everybody's door could be different. And he was able to update, in other words, put in a new context, teachings that were 5,000 years old. To illustrate, am I off track here? Am I okay with you?
No, you're fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So he would update things, and I think things need to be updated. So, for example, if the old Zen, there's an old Zen koan, and the Zen koan is, the barbarian has no beard. Now, for us in 2009, the barbarian has no beard. To appreciate and understand that koan, you have to be in 500 AD in China. In other words, people didn't wear beards, everybody wore a beard. The barbarian relates to Bodhidharma, who's a Buddhist who brought the teachings from India to China in about 500 AD. He had a beard. So you have to have a whole cultural context and understanding, historical, to understand even what the koan might mean. So what Maharaj was able to transcend or translate, is probably a better word, is translate basic old teachings from thousands of years ago into present time reality. So he would say to me, for example, fluids come together and an I am appears. What does that mean? He basically summarized 80 plus years of neuroscience in one sentence. Because from that, we now know that fluids in the brain come together and then the I am arises later after the fact. So fluids come together in the sense of I or I am arises. That's all. But what has to realize that, besides that information, that means that all of your understandings, the way you communicate, the way your brain and your psychology organize, all that stuff starts being deconstructed. If the I arises later, and I can claim doership or authorship or whatever for something I had no knowledge about, I didn't do it. The I arose later. So therefore, by giving you that key, in other words, he's teaching you in the Bhagavad Gita 5,300 years ago, Krishna says to Arjuna, you do nothing. Okay, there is no doer. But to say that to a Westerner, it's go, I'm not a doer. What do you mean? I'm doing everything. But if he translates this to neuroscience and I explain it to you, and you're willing to say, that's a key. I am now going to be with that for some time. As a Buddhist koan, you don't just say, what is the sound of one hand clapping, and the person answers the koan. The person has to sit with it and be with it and be with it. And it unravels itself and all the positions, the fixed ideas, the stories, the understandings, the perceptions, all of a sudden drift away and you realize you're not the doer. The I arises later and I have nothing whatsoever to do with it. So he offered translations, keys, understandings. He took old ancient teachings and, in quotes, updated them and kept the integrity of it. And so for me, science and non-duality means how can we use keys, some keys that science give you. There's no choice. The I arises after the fact, those neurological facts. There's no cause and effect, 1964, Bell's theorem. To reevaluate, if there's no cause and effect, and if the I arises after the fact, then if you say to me, why did you do this, and I give you a response, and I think that it's true, then I am trapping myself and limiting myself as a separate individual being or self who did an action and got a reaction. Nobody knows why anybody did anything. I don't know why I'm sitting here. You don't know why you're sitting here. And for that reason, actually, in Zen Buddhism, there's almost a mantra that they give, which is, I don't know. I mean, just anything that comes up, I don't know. Because you know in your heart of hearts, you don't know. And if you were just to take in that I don't know and absorb it and focus on it, imagine how many things would just kind of dissolve and be deconstructed. You don't know shit. And Maharaj had this beautiful statement. He said, before I met my guru, I knew so many things. And after time, I realized I knew nothing and I wanted nothing. The way the process works is that the nervous system and brain wants to organize chaos. Therefore, it places everything in a time continuum. First, there was nothingness. Somehow the nothingness exploded in a big bang, condensed nothingness, the big black hole or something. This kind of exploded, is a story. And one day, we got a beginning, we got a middle, and we got an end in our story. Whether it's a creation myth or whether it's a scientific creation myth. We're all stuck in the mind game of there had to be a beginning, there has to be a middle, we haven't got an end, we got to find an ending. The ending is religion. Either we have a soul that goes to another place or blah, 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 blah. We don't want to end. The story doesn't want to end. So it's a story about what is and what isn't and how it happened and how it doesn't happen. You have to bear in mind the most important thing in quantum physics is that it's observer dependent, right? They're observer created realities. So that, I'm not saying the Big Bang is true or it's not true. I'm just saying that because we have observer created realities, because we have all these different points of view and lenses, and all this thing appears to be going on. Each lens will give us a story or a narrative about how it began, and either it will or won't end. There are people now saying the world is going to end in 2012, right? The Mayan calendar is coming to the end. You know, they must have known something, the Mayans. But the Mayans also used to sacrifice human beings, so I don't know why they're a model for human behavior. So the point I'm trying to make is, prior to the creation myth, what is there? So it's easy to go forward, in quotes, into our stories and maps to look for the answer. What Maharaj is basically saying is, forget me, forget Maharaj, forget even the teachings. Stay in the consciousness as a portal to the absolute. We're going prior to our stories. And as far as these perceptions, in other words, if we give a scientist a microscope, if we went to most scientists, they'd say, yes, there's Big Bang and all these things happen. But they're all perceiver. In other words, Maharaj used to say, on what does it depend upon? On what does it depend upon? They're all dependent upon a perceiver perceiving it. Is there a without a perceiver perceiving it, is there a Big Bang? So everybody believes there's an objective world, and we're all going to agree and object about it, have it objects, and so we're going to measure it, and so on and so on. But even the concept of measuring is by agreement. We agree that there's time. But is there time prior to the word time? So one of the things is the question why we're here presupposes a why, an answer, by virtue of the question. So if we discard the word why and because, there's no reason. Prior to the word why and because, is there a reason? Prior to the word where, is there a location? Quantum physics has already showed there's no such thing as location. If there's one substance, not two, if that's the way it is, then how can be there a location? Location is only in reference to space-time. I'm here and you're there. If there's one substance, then there's no location. So therefore, where is gone? Why? How things work? Nobody knows how anything works. No one knows how gravity works. There's theories, points of views. No one knows what gravity even is. So the question always is, if you shift the process, go back the way you came, Ramana Maharshi, from your theories, your thoughts, your ideas, rather than going forward into models and understandings and trying to explain and understand, you're never going to get anything from that other than more explanations and more understandings. But if you go back the way you came, prior to thoughts, prior to the space that thoughts arose in, prior to the sense of I, which is aware of all of that, then I'm just the consciousness. Prior to the consciousness. People have ideas about emptiness. From one point of view, most people are going to experience, in quotes, within themselves as a person, what they're going to experience is a gnawing inner emptiness that somehow nothing is going to fill. They have an idea, they feel this gnawing existential emptiness. And they're going to try to fulfill that or fill up their own emptiness. Whether in a relationship I'll fill up the emptiness, with sex, with money, whether it be drugs, whether it be work, they're going to try to fill up this gnawing inner emptiness. Okay. That gnawing inner emptiness, existential emptiness, which you're referring to, I'm not talking about that emptiness. If everyone would just use that as a portal into the big emptiness. In other words, notice where in your body you experience the gnawing inner emptiness that's always there. And if you focus your attention on that and go backward and peel back all the labels, we'll call it inert, dead, depressed, fear, whatever it is, just keep peeling back the layers and go back the way you came, through that gnawing emptiness hole, prior to all the labels. There's just the emptiness with no stuff about it, no labels on it. So it's the stories and the labels we have about emptiness that's the problem. The emptiness is the emptiness is the emptiness. And that's where the problem is.